I woke to 16 staples in my gut and Troy Gatlin grinning at the foot of my hospital bed. My business partner of 20 years, standing there in his logo polo and cowboy boots. Blowned everything now. You signed it all away yourself, buddy, he said. All 3 restaurants. The accounts. The name. The heart monitor beeped. I smiled. Check your kitchen. His face went white. Then came the shutdown. Quick favor. Hit subscribe and comment your city and time. It helps the channel, and I love reading them. My name is Darren Kubiak. I'm 50 years old, and I spent 8 years walking into other people's kitchens and telling them what they didn't want to hear. County health inspector, 3 counties across Middle Tennessee, hundreds of commercial kitchens, diners, chain restaurants, school cafeterias, barbecue joints running equipment older than I was. I carried a clipboard and a digital thermometer and the full weight of the Tennessee Food Safety Act. Grease trap violations, cross-contamination zones, cold storage temperatures running 6 degrees above code. I logged everyone, memorized the violation codes the way some people memorize batting averages, could walk into any kitchen in the state and tell you within 90 seconds whether it would pass or fail. I was fair, but I was thorough. Restaurant owners either respected me or dreaded my car in their parking lot. Didn't matter which. I slept fine every night because what I wrote on that clipboard was the truth. Numbers don't negotiate. Temperatures don't lie. People do. But I hadn't learned that part yet. At 30, I left the department. My best friend since 3rd grade, Troy Gatlin, had been bouncing between car dealerships and half-started businesses for a decade. We pooled what we had, my savings, his savings, $14,000 between us, and bought a used offset smoker from a retired caterer in Murfreesboro, welded the patches ourselves. Painted Kubiak and Gatlin on the side of a rented food truck in block letters Troy picked out. Your name first, he said, slapping the wet paint with his palm. You're the cook. I'm just the mouth. I didn't argue. The brisket is what built us. I've been working that recipe since I was 14, standing beside my grandfather's backyard pit on Saturday mornings while other kids slept in. He never wrote anything down, watched the smoke, felt the firebox, trimmed by touch. I spent 16 years turning what he taught me into a system. 14 hours, low and slow, specific wood blends and temperature curves I recorded in pocket-sized Moleskine notebooks using a shorthand code I developed myself. Nobody else could read those notebooks. That was by design. Word spread. By the 3rd month, we had lines before we opened the window. 5 in the morning, parking lot still dark, smoke rolling off the offset into cold air. By the 6th month, sold out by 2 in the afternoon. People drove 40 minutes for a plate of brisket they couldn't get anywhere else. A year later, we converted a former auto parts store on Main Street into our first restaurant. I built the pit room myself, 2 custom-welded offset smokers, concrete floor, ventilation I designed from scratch, 80 seats, our name on the sign. The hickory smell soaked into the walls and never came out. Troy ran the front of the house, remembered every customer's name, their kids' names, what they ordered last time. He'd work a Friday dinner service like a politician at a fundraiser. Handshakes, backslaps, pulling up a chair to hear about somebody's fishing trip. People came for the brisket. They stayed because Troy made them feel like regulars on their first visit. We opened a second location 4 years later, a third 2 years after that, both in neighboring towns within 40 minutes of the flagship. My wife Jolene kept the books. Payroll, vendor accounts, tax filings, the whole financial spine of 3 restaurants. She reconciled every bank statement the week it arrived, caught discrepancies I never would have noticed. 40 notebooks filled the floor safe in the flagship's pit room by then. Every recipe, every modification, every smoke log from 20 years of cooking, all written in shorthand only I could decode. Those notebooks were the real business. The buildings, the equipment, the bank accounts, all replaceable. The recipes weren't. I never audited Jolene's books, never questioned Troy's vendor contracts or his expansion budgets, never asked to see the quarterly statements I knew she prepared for him. 20 years of partnership. 20 years of splitting everything down the middle, standing shoulder to shoulder at ribbon cuttings, building something I thought would outlast all of us. Troy was family, closer than family, because I'd picked him every morning for 20 years without once checking the math. I pieced this together afterward. Bank records, text messages, vendor invoices that Hector Ruiz, my attorney, a former colleague from my health department days, subpoenaed during discovery. None of it existed for me while it was happening. I was in the pit room at 4 in the morning, running cooks. Troy was running something else. The resentment started with the magazine profiles. Nashville Scene ran a feature on us in 2019. Full-page photo of me pulling brisket from the offset, smoke curling around my arms. Troy appeared in one photograph, background holding a plate. The article mentioned him in paragraph 11 as Kubiak's business partner who manages the front of house. What I learned later from the email records Hector pulled was that Troy had pitched that feature himself, called the editor, set up the photo shoot, arranged the whole thing. He'd also landed the Titans catering contract that year. 3 months of phone calls and working dinners that brought in more revenue than our third location. The article didn't mention either of those things. I didn't think anything of it at the time. Troy laughed it off. "You're the talent, brother," he said, slapping my shoulder at the bar that night. "I'm just the mouth, right?" He'd been saying variations of that for years. At some point, the grin behind it went flat. It happened again. The Tennessee BBQ Association's Pitmaster of the Year, my name on the plaque, Troy clapping in the second row. Then a local TV crew came to film a weekend food segment. They set up in the pit room, lights rigged above the smokers, camera 2 feet from my hands as I trimmed a brisket. 11 minutes of me explaining smoke rings and BART formation while Troy waited in the dining room. I could see him through the pass-through window, standing behind the hostess stand, adjusting his collar. The reporter walked over, asked 2 questions about reservations and weekend wait times, 90 seconds, and moved on. Troy smiled the whole time. Food and Wine listed our brisket in their regional top 10 that fall. Darren Kubiak's 14-hour process. No mention of Gatlin, 20 years of being introduced as the other half. The second name on the sign he'd painted himself. I don't know when Troy first contacted Lone Star BBQ Corp. The earliest email Hector recovered was dated 14 months before my surgery. Troy used his personal email, positioned himself as sole decision-maker, never CC'd me once. $2 million, franchise conversion of all 3 locations, our recipes and brand licensed nationwide. The term Sheet Troy sent to Lone Star's acquisition team spelled it out. Hector also recovered texts between Troy and Trent Adler, the franchise attorney he'd hired without telling me. "Listen, 2 million, buddy," Troy wrote, my face on every billboard from here to Dallas. In one photo from that period, Troy sat in a steakhouse booth with Lone Star's people, flipping the monogrammed poker chip he carried everywhere, gold G stamped on both sides. But Lone Star needed clean numbers. Profit margins that justified a $2 million acquisition. 3 BBQ restaurants running premium suppliers don't throw off the returns a corporate buyer expects. So Troy started cutting. The vendor switch came first. Carla Fitzsimmons, our head waitress since the food truck days, confirmed it during discovery. She'd taken photos of boxes in the walk-in with supplier logos she didn't recognize. Discount distributors out of Arkansas selling commodity brisket at 60% of our regular cost. Troy told the kitchen staff I'd approved the change. Then, the maintenance deferrals. Refrigeration units at the satellite locations ran past their service dates by 8 weeks, then 12. The compressor at our second location ground so loud the line cooks started wearing earplugs. Cleaning supply orders dropped 40% across all 3 kitchens. The FIFO rotation logs I'd built for cold storage, daily checks, documented temperatures, dated product labels, stopped being maintained. Whatever the morning crew felt like doing became the new standard. Every cut boosted the quarterly numbers Troy fed to Lone Star's due diligence team. Every cut was the kind of thing I used to write up on a clipboard, but I wasn't carrying a clipboard anymore. The affair with Jolene started over spreadsheets. That's what the text record showed, late-night messages about quarterly projections that turned into complaints about me, my hours, my absence, the way I chose the pit room over our dinner table. He loves those smokers more than anything with a pulse, Jolene wrote to Troy at 11,047 on a Wednesday night. Drinks Thursday, he replied. Thursday became every Thursday. Drinks became dinner. Dinner became hotels. The credit card record showed 4 charges at the same Comfort Inn off I-40 between March and May. I was running a 14-hour cook. They were building something of their own. Jolene knew every account number, every routing code, every password. She'd kept our books since the first restaurant opened. The transfers started small, 2,000, 3,500, moving from joint business accounts into a new account held in Troy's name alone. 6 weeks of withdrawals, each staying under the reporting thresholds I'd never thought to set. Operating funds, reserves, the vendor payment account. He didn't notice I changed the payroll password. She texted Troy 3 weeks before my surgery. Not once. By the time Troy stood at the foot of my hospital bed with that grin, the accounts were empty. The franchise paperwork was drafted. The locks were ready to change. And I hadn't caught a single discrepancy because I was standing where I'd always stood, over the smoker, watching the temperature, trusting the people I'd chosen to watch everything else. The pain hit at 4:17 on a Tuesday morning. I was pulling the third brisket from the offset at the flagship when something twisted low in my abdomen. Sharp, wrong, not the kind that passes. By the time one of my line cooks found me on the pit room floor, the pain had migrated to my right side and turned into something that wouldn't let go. Emergency room at St. Luke's Regional. Dr. Namita Shah, the general surgeon on rotation, diagnosed acute appendicitis, ruptured, she told me later, which meant open surgery instead of laparoscopic. Had me on the table within the hour. Anesthesia at 5:42 a.m. Surgery complete at 7:18 a.m. 16 staples closing the incision. All of it logged in the hospital's time-stamped surgical and anesthesia records. What I learned later from county clerk timestamps and Hector's subpoenas, while I was under, Trent Adler, a franchise attorney out of Nashville that Troy had hired months earlier, filed ownership transfer documents at the county clerk's office at 6:55 a.m. 3 sets of papers, one for each location, each bearing my signature. The timestamps fell within the exact window I lay unconscious on Dr. Shah's table, which Trent would have known if he'd bothered to verify the signatory was awake. He didn't bother. His cut from the Lone Star deal depended on speed, not questions. I woke at 11 to an empty room, a dry mouth, antiseptic air, and an IV drip counting seconds. Tried to sit up. The staples pulled and I dropped back against the pillow. Called Troy. Voicemail. Called Jolene. Voicemail. Called the flagship's landline. 14 rings. Nobody picked up. I tried again at noon, at 1, at 2:30. Same voicemails, same silence. By evening, the flagship's voicemail greeting had changed. Troy's voice, new hours. No mention of my name. The nurse brought dinner at 6. I didn't touch it. Opened the banking app on my phone instead. Primary business checking, 0. Payroll account, 0. Vendor payments, 0. Joint savings, 0. Every dollar from 20 years of 14-hour days transferred to accounts I didn't recognize, routing numbers I'd never seen. I set the phone face down on the hospital blanket and stared at the ceiling. The heart monitor beeped. I counted the tiles above my bed, 12 across, 9 deep, numbers I could trust. Next morning, I called Jolene's sister in Chattanooga. She picked up on the second ring. "Where's Jolene?" I asked. "She left, Darren. Showed up here Sunday night with Jake and 2 suitcases." Sunday night. 2 days before my surgery, she went quiet. "She told everyone you signed everything over to Troy. The restaurants, the accounts. Said you quit." "I was in surgery." "She told Jake you abandoned them." My son, 16 years old, working my register on weekends, learning to read a smoke ring from the color of the bark. His mother telling him I walked away, that I chose the smokers over him and never looked back. 20 years of my life. Every recipe, every 14-hour cook, my business, my money, my wife, my son, all taken in the 96 minutes I spent unconscious on an operating table. I hung up, pressed the nurse call button. "I need discharge papers." "Mr. Kubiak, your one-day post-op discharge papers." She brought them 20 minutes later. I signed with my own hand, my own signature, while awake and breathing. Small details. Spent the afternoon making calls that went nowhere. Discharge took until evening. Paperwork. A doctor who wanted one more look at the incision. My phone buzzed at 9:47 that night. I sat on the edge of the hospital bed, dressed, 16 staples pulling against my shirt, waiting for a cab. A text from Carla Fitzsimmons, my head waitress since the food truck days, still working under Troy because she needed the paycheck. 3 photos, each one time-stamped. The first showed the flagship's front door, where the painted letters once read Kubiak and Gatlin. Someone had taken a putty knife to my name. Raw wood showing through in pale streaks where the paint had been. Gatlin remained, clean and untouched. The second knew deadbolts on every entrance, commercial grade, keyed different from anything I owned. The third, the hand-painted sign I'd hung above the register 20 years ago, Kubiak and Gatlin BBQ EST 2004, face down in the dumpster behind the building. I saved all 3 photos. Checked the timestamps twice. Noted the metadata. Then I started a list. First entry, Dr. Namita Shah's surgical records. My mother Peg drove me from St. Luke's to her farmhouse that night. 5 acres of scrubby pasture land 20 minutes outside town, a 2-story clapboard house she'd lived in alone since my father passed. She didn't ask questions on the drive. Didn't need to. She'd been a school teacher for 38 years. She could read a face the way I could read a thermometer. She set me up in my old bedroom, brought coffee and toast I didn't touch, and stood in the doorway. "You going to sit in this bed feeling sorry for yourself? Or are you going to do something about it?" "I'm going to do something about it." "Good. Kitchen table's clear. I'll make more coffee." By morning, that table was covered. Legal pads. Printed health code statutes I'd downloaded from the Tennessee Department of Health website. Carla's time-stamped photos run through Peg's inkjet. The colors washed out but the metadata intact. My discharge papers from St. Luke's with Dr. Shah's surgical timeline. Morning light through the kitchen windows. Coffee pot always on. I sat there in an old flannel and jeans, 16 staples catching every time I reached for a pen, and I built. First call, Hector Ruiz, food safety attorney in Nashville, former colleague from my health department days. We'd walked kitchens together for 4 years before he went to law school. He picked up on the first ring. "I need help," I said. Troy forged my signature on ownership transfers while I was in surgery. Jolene drained the accounts. They took everything. Hector was quiet for 3 seconds. "What do you need from me?" Dr. Shah's surgical and anesthesia records. Time-stamped. I need them matched against the county clerk's filing times on those transfer documents. The clerk's filings are public record. I'll pull those today. Shah's medical records take a subpoena, but I'll have them by end of week. He paused. "And Darren, file nothing until I review it. Everything by the book." He had the medical records in 4 days. I spread them across Peg's kitchen table next to the clerk's timestamps he'd already obtained. Dr. Shah's anesthesia log, general anesthesia administered at 5:42 a.m., surgery complete at 7:18 a.m., patient unconscious and intubated for the full duration. Recovery room. Patient responsive at 8:45 a.m. County clerk filing stamp on the ownership transfers. 6:55 a.m. I was on a table with a tube down my throat when someone signed my name. No attorney could explain that away. No judge would try. Hector filed the forgery documentation that afternoon. Dr. Shaw's records against the clerk's timestamps, the foundation of everything that would follow. But forgery charges would take months. The Lone Star franchise deal wouldn't wait months. If Troy closed that deal before I could act, every recipe in those 40 Moleskine notebooks became corporate property under a contract I never signed. I needed something faster, something Troy had already built for me without knowing it. The next morning, I took a clean legal pad from the stack and wrote violation codes from memory. Tennessee Food Safety Act, Section 6814-701, violations classified for immediate closure. I hadn't recited these codes in 20 years, but they came back the way your hands remember a brisket trim. Muscle memory, the knowledge sitting in your fingers before your brain catches up. Improper cold storage temperatures. Troy had deferred refrigeration maintenance at both satellite locations for months. Carla's text confirmed the compressor at the second location ground so loud the cooks wore earplugs. Units running past service dates don't hold temperature. They climb 2 degrees, 4, 6 above code. Immediate closure, cross-contamination risk from unapproved suppliers. Troy switched to discount meat distributors without USDA process verification. Commodity brisket from an uncertified supply chain stored alongside ready-to-eat product. Immediate closure. Deferred equipment maintenance creating a public health hazard. Smoker ventilation, grease traps, cold storage rotation logs, all abandoned when Troy slashed the cleaning budget by 40%. Immediate closure. All 3 locations. Peg refilled my coffee without asking. Looked at the legal pads covering her table. "You're not going to confront him," she said. "Not a question." "No." "Good. That boy's been waiting for you to lose your temper since the day he changed those locks. Don't give him the satisfaction." She picked up my untouched toast plate and replaced it with a new one. Never did trust that woman's bookkeeping. But you didn't want to hear it. I didn't argue. She was right. I filed 3 formal health complaints that afternoon, 1 for each location. Proper channels, proper forms, proper codes cited. Submitted through the county health department's online portal with my name, my former inspector credentials, and my documented basis for each complaint. I didn't plant a single violation. Didn't need to. Troy built them himself. I just knew where to look. 3 months ago, I was running 3 restaurants. Now I was sitting at my mother's kitchen table filing health complaints. But I wasn't starting from nothing. I was starting from everything I knew. 6 days after I filed the complaints, the inspectors arrived at 9001 Fifth on a Tuesday morning. I wasn't there. Didn't need to be. I sat at Peg's kitchen table with coffee and waited. County health inspections require no appointment, no warning. 3 inspectors, 3 locations, same morning. Standard procedure when complaints indicate a pattern across commonly owned establishments. I knew the process because I'd walked through those doors for 8 years. Clipboard, thermometer, gloves, flashlight. Check cold storage first. That's where corners show fastest. Hold the temperature logs. Open the walk-in. Read the compressor gauges. If the units haven't been serviced, the numbers tell you in 30 seconds. Carla, my head waitress since the food truck days, texted at 9:47, "They're here, flagship." I didn't respond. At 10,012, walk-in running 44 degrees. Code requires 41 or below. 3 degrees doesn't sound like much. It's enough to grow bacteria that puts people in the hospital. At 10,031, found the Arkansas boxes, pulling invoices. The discount brisket. No USDA process verification. Commodity meat stored next to ready-to-eat product with no separation protocol. I'd written that violation 100 times on other people's clipboards. I didn't need a text about the second location. The compressor alone would shut them down. Units running 12 weeks past service don't hold temperature. They climb 2 degrees, 4, 6 above code. I already knew what those inspectors were writing on their clipboards. Peg sat across from me, reading glasses on, working a crossword. She didn't ask about the texts. By 11, 3 bright orange placards reading "Closed by order of Health Department" were taped to 3 glass doors across 2 counties. Every violation I'd reported, confirmed on-site by inspectors with their own thermometers and their own eyes. I set my phone down. 20 years of my life on 3 orange signs. But those violations were real. Every one of them. Hector called at 11,040, IP claims filed that morning. The argument was straightforward. 40 handwritten notebooks in a floor safe, trade secrets under Tennessee's Uniform Trade Secrets Act. The ownership transfer, even if it had been legitimate, transferred the business entity, not the intellectual property. Troy can't legally serve a single item from your menu, Hector said. And the forgery, filed this morning alongside the IP claims. Shaw's anesthesia log against the clerk's timestamps. Your signature on documents at 6:55 a.m. Surgery from 5042 to 7008. The math does itself. Lone Star? Their due diligence team pulled the filings an hour ago. Health violations, ownership disputes, IP claims, forgery filings. All hitting their review at once. General Counsel called Adler's office 20 minutes ago. Deals dead, 2 million gone. He paused. And Adler filed those transfers while you were under anesthesia. He's exposed too. That's a conversation for next week. I hung up and sat with that. Coffee gone cold. Outside, birds on the fence line. Normal Tuesday sounds on 5 acres of nothing special. Troy's truck came up the gravel drive at 3005 that afternoon. I heard it before I saw it. Engine running hard, tires throwing rocks. I sat on the porch in a clean Henley and jeans, glass of water on the railing. Afternoon sun had warmed the wood under my boots. He came out of the cab red-faced, polo untucked, the swagger gone. No handshake, no brother. 6 steps across the yard to the bottom of the porch stairs. You called the health department on me? His voice cracked on the last word. I didn't stand up. Listen, those kitchens were fine before you started making calls. This is you being vindictive. This is you trying to burn everything down because you couldn't. Walk in at the flagship was running 44 degrees, I said. That's 3 degrees. 3 degrees above code. I wrote that violation 200 times in 8 years. Means the same thing every time. He pointed at me. His hand shook. The gold watch caught afternoon light, same watch he'd worn to every ribbon cutting, every Lone Star dinner. His other hand went to his pocket, reaching for the poker chip. Whatever he found there or didn't, his fist came back empty. I built those restaurants, he said. You ran the rooms. I built the kitchens. And you gutted them to juice your margins for a franchise deal I never agreed to. Here's the thing, Darren. Every single violation they found today, you created yourself. I picked up my water, took a drink, set it back down. I didn't plant a thing. I just remembered where to look. Troy stood at the bottom of those stairs, mouth opened, closed. The class ring on his right hand caught light as his fist tightened and released. He turned and walked back to his truck. The engine started, tires through gravel, and the sound faded down the county road until the only thing left was birds and the quiet that had been there all along. The weekly paper ran it above the fold. 3 photographs. One of each orange placard taped to each glass door, under a headline that didn't need to be clever. Kubiak and Gatlin, BBQ, shut down at all 3 locations. In a town of 12,000, that headline moved faster than the paper could print. The local Facebook group had 47 comments by noon, 112 by dinner. People who'd eaten brisket at my counter for 15 years posting their shock, their theories, their "I always knew something" was off takes that nobody had voiced when Troy was still shaking hands and buying rounds. I read none of it. Peg did. She sat at the kitchen table with her reading glasses and her phone, scrolling with one finger. Barbara Hendricks from my church group says Troy's been telling people you sabotage the kitchens, she said. Let him. She also says nobody believes him. The farmers market that Saturday confirmed it. Peg came back with tomatoes and information. The vendors were talking. Troy had stiffed 3 of them on invoices. The produce guy, the bread baker, the woman who sold us peach cobbler filling by the 5-gallon bucket. Debts he'd run up while draining the accounts. Debts with his name alone on them now. I'd spent 20 years earning those Friday night regulars. 100,000 plates of brisket carried through a kitchen that never sent out a wrong order. Troy undid all of it in a single invoice cycle. Trent Adler, Troy's franchise attorney, the one who'd filed those transfer documents at 6:55 a.m., broke first. I expected that. Hector called on a Thursday. Adler's cooperating. Filed a statement with the state bar this morning. Full disclosure, the ownership transfers, the filing timeline, everything. He's confirmed the documents were prepared at Troy's direction and filed without verifying your presence or capacity. He's saving his license and handing us Troy in the process. Hector referred the forgery evidence to the district attorney's office the same week. The felony charges came 10 days later. 3 counts of Class D forgery. 1 for each location's transfer documents. Each count carrying 2 to 12 years in state prison. The district attorney's filing cited Dr. Shaw's surgical records, the county clerk's timestamps, and Adler's sworn statement. The math that did itself. Troy posted bail within hours. Bail doesn't rebuild what 3 orange placards tear down. Not in a town this size. What I'd already pieced together from Hector's subpoenas, the affair, the Comfort Inn stays, the texts, went into the court filings, and from the court filings into the town. The Comfort Inn charges came out in depositions. 4 stays, same room, Troy's credit card, Jolene's name on the guest registry. The text messages followed, late-night complaints about me that became something else. Dates, times, hotel confirmation numbers. It went public the way things go, public in small towns. The Comfort Inn records got filed as exhibits in a court motion, and someone in the clerk's office mentioned it to someone at the diner. By the weekend, the Facebook group had a new thread with 300 comments. People who'd watched Jolene sit in the front pew on Sunday mornings while I pulled 14-hour cooks now reading her text about how I loved those smokers more than anything with a pulse. The story she'd built, that I'd signed everything away, that I'd quit, that I'd chosen smokers over my son, fell apart under the weight of an anesthesia log timed to the minute. Jolene controlled the narrative for weeks. A surgeon's timestamp ended it in one filing. I'd gotten the restaurants back on paper. The IP claims, the forgery reversal, the frozen accounts. Hector was unwinding all of it. But there was one thing no court could return. Jake showed up on a Thursday evening. I was on the porch, same chair, glass of water on the railing. Headlights came up the gravel drive. Crickets went quiet. Not Troy's truck, not Jolene's car. A sedan I didn't recognize. The engine cut. My son stepped out. 16 years old, tall and thin in the flannel jacket he used to wear, working my register on Saturday mornings. He stood in the porch light with his hands in his pockets. I knew from Hector that copies of the surgical records, the anesthesia times, the clerk's filing stamps had been entered into the public case file 2 days ago. Anyone could read them. A 16-year-old who needed the truth could find it. He didn't say anything. Didn't need to. My hand stopped on the screen door, held there a second longer than it should have. I opened the door. Peg appeared in the hallway behind me. She looked at Jake, looked at me, and walked back to the kitchen. A moment later, I heard a third coffee mug come down from the cabinet. If you're enjoying my story, hit like and rate it from 1 to 10 in the comments. Tell me why. Thank you. 6 months later, I hung the new sign myself. Main Street, same building, Kubiak's, BBQ, one name. The right one. The smokers ran the same way they always had. 14 hours, low and slow, hickory smoke rolling through the dining room and soaking into walls that still held 20 years of smoke. I took the first brisket off the offset at 6 in the morning, checked the bark, checked the ring. Clean. Logged the temperature in notebook 41, pen steady between scarred knuckles. Same shorthand nobody else could read. Same recipes Troy never got his hands on because they were never on paper he could understand. My son Jake works the register on weekends. Tall behind the counter in his flannel, making change, learning the names of regulars the way I learned them 20 years ago. He doesn't talk much about what happened. Neither do I. Some things heal better in silence, standing side by side doing the work. My mother Peg takes the corner table every Sunday, orders the same plate, sliced brisket, coleslaw, sweet tea, eats slow, watches the room fill up, 80 seats, and most of them full again by the second month. I don't think about Troy. Don't need to. The courts handled what the courts handle. I'm back where I started. Over a smoker, watching the temperature, trusting what I can measure. Numbers don't negotiate. Temperatures don't lie. People do, but the truth has a way of catching up, one inspection at a time.